Hello, grade threes. I'm so excited to be sharing this awesome story with you. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to warm weather and summer. And when I saw this story, I thought it would be a great one to share because it combines that excitement about summer and water fights with our squirt guns, and also a little bit about engineering and persevering when we really want to do something. This is called Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's super soaking stream of inventions, and it is a true story about the inventor of the Super Soaker water gun. Every day brought a challenge for young Lonnie Johnson, the challenge of finding space for his stuff. 6 Johnson kids were squeezed into their parents' small house in Mobile, Alabama. Lonnie would have loved a workshop of his own, but there just wasn't room. There was nowhere to keep his rocket kits, bamboo shooters, rubber band guns, erector set, go-kart engine, bolts and screws and other spare parts his dad let him bring in from the shed, and various other things he'd hauled back from the junkyard. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. Maybe you can make a little connection sign if you also love to build and create with found objects. He learned how to make rockets from scratch. Kids at school gathered to watch Lonnie launch them, and he learned how to make rocket fuel. When it caught fire in the kitchen, Lonnie's mom didn't make him stop. She just sent him to work outside. Lonnie wanted to spend his life designing things, building things, and getting them to work. He wanted to be an engineer. However, Lonnie took an exam that said he would not make a very good one. His dream had been challenged. Lonnie was discouraged, but he knew that whoever had graded his test hadn't met Linux. That would be really discouraging to take like a career test and know that you really love being an engineer and creating things, and to have the test say, yeah, you would make a very good engineer. I'm really glad that Lonnie kept going, even though that test said that to him. So let's meet Linux. Inspired by a TV show, Lonnie had built his own robot. He made it out of scrap metal and named it Linux. Compressed air cylinders and valves allowed Linux's body to turn and its arms to move. The switches came from an old broken jukebox. Lonnie used a tape recorder to program Linux, and as a bonus, the reels looked like eyes. Lonnie wanted to enter his creation in a science fair, but he couldn't get the transmitter to work. Without the transmitter, Lonnie couldn't send commands to Linux. Science fairs came and went. Lonnie missed one and then another until he got an idea. Now, Lonnie may or may not have asked before he borrowed his little sister's walkie-talkie. But it fixed the transmission issue. His school's team took freshly finished Linux the robot to a 1968 science fair at the University of Alabama, where only just 5 years earlier, African-American students hadn't even been allowed. Having to compete in a place that still wasn't very welcoming, now that was a challenge with a capital C. Against other schools from all over the state, Lonnie's team won first place. Soon, Lonnie left home to go to college at Tuskegee Institute, where he stood out as a self-confident, insightful, creative thinker. Those are all really important when you're being an engineer. He stood out as a student who asked the right questions, precisely defined problems, and formulated solutions. And he stood out as the guy who built his own booming sound system out of cast-off electronics. It even had lights that flashed in sync with the beat. Lonnie sometimes studied right in the middle of his own parties. The extra studying paid off. He became an engineer after graduation, and that took him beyond Alabama, way beyond. When NASA was sending an orbiter and probe called Galileo to Jupiter, the space agency needed to ensure a constant supply of power to the orbiter's computer memory. The engineer who had to figure out how to do it was Lonnie. His challenge was to come up with a lightweight backup system able to keep essential functions going in case the main power was lost. It wasn't easy, it wasn't obvious, but Lonnie found a solution. Some at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory doubted his idea would work. Lonnie convinced them that it would, and he was right. As it photographed Jupiter and its moons, Galileo was supported by the power package that Lonnie had designed. Much of what we know about Jupiter could have been at risk in a power failure, if not for Lonnie. Ideas for other problems to solve just kept on flowing. They flowed whether Lonnie was working with hundreds of people at NASA or up late tinkering with his own inventions in, finally, his very own workshop. You can see that here. Lonnie knew the world's millions of refrigerators and air conditioners needed a new cooling system, one that didn't use R12, a chemical that was bad for the environment. He had an idea for using water and air pressure instead. To test his idea, he made a pump and a nozzle, connected them to the bathroom faucet, turned on the faucet, turned on the pump, and then whoosh! The stream that blasted across the bathroom was so powerful, it created a curtain-swirling breeze. It also gave him an idea for yet another invention. This, he thought, would make a great water gun. First, he had to find or make the parts, including a pump small enough for a child to handle. Then he had to glue the parts together into a prototype, an early version with room for improvement. Finally, Lonnie tested his strange-looking squirt gun at a picnic. "Does it really work?" a man asked. "Sure," Lonnie said. "Do you want to see?" Lonnie worked the pump, which squeezed air into a chamber. When he pulled the trigger, air escaped, forcing water out with a whoosh. I'm just going to go in here so you can see. It looks sort of similar to the water guns that we use these days. But that's the prototype. That's the very first one that was made that he had to keep working on until it worked just how he was hoping it would. And it looks like these kids are having a lot of fun. For a water battle to be a fair fight, there couldn't just be one of Lonnie's water guns. He needed help making more. So he went to toy company after toy company after toy company. And you can see him here pitching the idea like, "Hey guys, what if we made an awesome water gun? Would you like to make this at your toy company?" No, 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 no. The word no flowed again and again, but finally one company said yes. That company planned to make his water gun. Lonnie also had other projects, a water-propelled toy airplane, 2 kinds of engines, and his cooling system. He found investors to provide the money for turning his ideas into products people could buy. He made a leap of faith, quit his day job, and devoted himself to full-time inventing. But soon, each plan fell apart, even the one for the water gun. These things sometimes happen. And when they happen one after another to the same person, well, that's some pretty bad luck. Lonnie didn't have a job. He didn't have the money he'd been counting on. He and his family had to move out of their home and into a little apartment. He was angry and scared. But Lonnie had dealt with challenges all his life. You guys remember the test that he had done that said he wouldn't be a good engineer? He's kind of familiar with this failure. And he knew a lot about solving problems. He's done that before too. And he still believed in his inventions, especially the water gun. So Lonnie went looking for another toy company. In 1989, he found a toy maker who was interested in seeing the water gun if Lonnie ever happened to be in Philadelphia. "But don't make a special trip," the guy said. Lonnie made a special trip. In his wife's suitcase, he carried a new prototype. He unpacked it, filled the tank with water, pumped the gun until the air pressure was good and high, and whoosh! Wow. I wonder if these guys have ever been sprayed by a water gun in a business meeting before. Looks like they're pretty happy about it. Kids everywhere agreed that wow, Lonnie's water gun, called the Super Soaker, became a smash hit. In no time, there were Super Soakers in backyards and on beaches, in parks and on playgrounds. Each sale of a Super Soaker put a little money into Lonnie's pocket. All those hours, all those years that Lonnie spent in his workshop had paid off big time. Now he could afford to do just about anything he wanted. So what did Lonnie do? He got a bigger workshop, which is where you'll find him today, because facing challenges, solving problems, and building things are just what Lonnie Johnson loves to do. And his ideas just keep on flowing. And I think that we should send, throw our hands together and send a big thank you to him for facing challenges, solving problems, and building things, because Super Soakers are pretty awesome. I just can't wait until it's warm enough for us to bust out the Super Soakers and spray each other in the backyard. Maybe next week, we'll see. So this is a true story. So the Super Soaker really does use a pump to compress the air found in the water reservoir, and that puts some pressure on the water, and then we get that pressurized water coming out with a big whoosh. And if you search the internet for how Super Soakers work, you'll find a lot more about what goes on inside his most famous invention. But if you want to better understand how Lonnie Johnson himself works, then you'll put this book down, step away from the computer screen, and get permission to take something apart so you can see those kinds of goings on for yourself. You might even start with a super soaker. Now, I'm not going to say that I gave you that idea, but taking things apart and figuring out how they work can be a really neat thing with permission from your parents. So this book began with a conversation that the author had with a couple of librarians in Texas. They had gone to a seminar where attendees were asked to draw a picture of a scientist. And the most common image was people drawing someone who looked like Albert Einstein in a lab coat with wild hair and with white skin. And the point of this exercise was to draw attention to the fact that scientists are a lot more diverse than that. Not all scientists look like Albert Einstein. And so this author decided that they wanted to write the story of the African-American rocket scientist who invented the super soaker, because it's important for us to have all of these stories to show the many different ways that scientists and really anyone can look. And so this author got to call Lonnie Johnson, talk to him on the phone. I guess he was just totally hilarious, and also learned that he didn't take his super soaker money and just retire early. Instead, he gave a lot of money to efforts to solve one of the most important engineering puzzles of our day, to harness the energy from the sun and other sources in order to generate electricity we need without polluting the planet. So another big thank you to Lonnie Johnson for taking on that big problem. So the author says that they love talking with Lonnie Johnson. They've never laughed as hard as they did during an interview with someone when they discussed Linux the robot and how his family put up with all of his work and the messiness of being a scientist as a young boy. And it's no surprise that today, even as he continues his own work, Lonnie Johnson makes time to encourage the efforts of tomorrow's scientists and engineers. So I hope that this book encouraged you too. Thank you so much for listening, and I will look forward to sharing more stories with you as we transition to learning from home. Bye, grade 3s.